Hello and welcome to another episode of Theology Happens. I'm Rob Schutz, and this is episode number 15. So, as we've been going through these different 20 points that I've mentioned, we are coming up on some of the last ones here, and this last one should be pretty straightforward. I don't think it's a crazy, revolutionary idea. Something actually, I assume most Christians have probably heard before. However, just given the nature of things and given just, frankly, my own shortcomings in this, I felt we probably could be reminded of this simple truth. And so the basic premise, just to jump right into things, is that we as a church are called to be salt and light. Pure and simple. And obviously, those concepts are rooted heavily in Christianese, but still, nevertheless, are fundamental to what we are doing and what we need to be about. So, the passage that we get this idea from is found in Matthew's Gospel in the 5th chapter, so Matthew chapter 5. And this chapter, for those who are potentially unfamiliar, Matthew 5 is the beginning of what is called the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus delivers one of his most well-known sermons, and where a lot of very famous and commonly heard Christian principles are taught. And so, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus starts off with the Beatitudes and gets going on some other things. But very quickly, one of the things he says is to be salt and light. And so, picking up in verse 13 of, again, Matthew chapter 5, we read this, and we'll go through 16. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall it be salty? How shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it shall give light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. And so that is our text that I want to look through and talk about this episode. And so, again, two familiar metaphors. Obviously, I suppose I need to make sure it's obvious, but Jesus isn't telling us to turn into salt or turn into literal light, right? We don't need to, find some, I don't even know how that would be possible. So never mind. Anyways, this is clearly a metaphor, and so we have to stop and go, okay, well, what is salt? Now, obviously, well, I guess I'm making a lot of obvious assumptions today, but at any rate, salt is something I assume most of us are familiar with. It's, something found probably in your cupboard. Maybe you got the little packets that you take from restaurants and take out, or maybe you got a big salt thing because you make lots of popcorn, like, well, we do. Or who knows? Maybe you're someone who loves adding salt to everything. Maybe you're someone who has to watch their salt. But nevertheless, we are pretty familiar with this concept here in the Western world. And so I think sometimes we maybe potentially forget that it's not just a flavor enhancer or something to add a little bit more boldness to a dish or whatever, but that salt in the ancient world is actually pretty important. Um, so, I mean, just first of all, salt is one of the things that progressed civilization. Without salt, meats would have rotted sooner. So our ability to just store certain foods would have gone away. And salt was a main fixture in the ancient world. It, like I said, it preserved meats and kept things lasting. It kept decay away. And so there's that importance of it. Also, because of this importance, salt was also often used as payment, sometimes to the Roman soldier, or it was a highly valuable commodity in the ancient world, again, because of its properties. And so, again, we can maybe get a little bit lost in the fact that, again, how important it is and how valuable it is, and maybe there's something to be said about that, Jesus calling us salt. However, I think the bigger point, because, again, in Jesus' own words here, he mentions how if it loses its saltiness, it's worthless. Now, now, in our day, I've never once thought about salt losing its saltiness. Again, we buy a big thing of it, and I've never noticed that the first few shakes are better than the last few. Whenever that salt runs out, I've never had a moment where I've been like, "What do you mean salt loses its saltiness?" Like I've never had to experience that. But the trouble with that is, well, not the trouble with that. The blessing of that is I live in the 21st century now, and we have pure salt. We're able to harvest or produce really good salt that lasts a long time. Now, in Judea, where Jesus is talking from, he's speaking to, again, the population of Judea primarily, obviously, because that's who's around. That's who he's actually preaching to. And with that, where do they get their salt? The Dead Sea. That's where most of the salt from that region was pulled from. But the salt from the Dead Sea wasn't perfect. It was corrupted by the water, by, again, the access to the Dead Sea there, and it was not a pure salt. And so it actually did expire at some point, that sometimes if salt wasn't used, it wouldn't be as good. It had a shelf life much shorter than what we think of when we think about salt. And so there is actually a historical context here to understand that it can lose its saltiness. Because I remember being a young Christian, again, just sort of being like, how do you mean? Like, salt doesn't lose its saltiness. Like, that's sort of what makes salt salt. This is a weird passage. But when we look at the historical context a little bit, we do actually see that that is indeed possible. So why do I spend all that time mentioning that? Because Jesus, is warning us to not become salt that loses saltiness. So that's an interesting concern. Because how would we know if salt isn't effective salt? Glad you asked. First, well, the first case would be, does this taste gone? If you try some salt, do we get the saltiness that we expect? That'd be taste number one. Taste number one. Test number one. A little slip there. Test number one. Does it taste like salt? Does it have the flavor of salt? See, we're getting pretty metaphorical, I think, but there's something to be said about this. if a Christian is losing his saltiness, does he taste or behave or carry on as salt ought? Are they standing up for the truth? Are they speaking the truth? Are they representing the truth? Are they praying? Are they seeking God? Are they in fellowship? Are they doing the normative things that we would expect a Christian to do? That would be test number one. Just literally lost its taste. It's normal. Its first fundamental point is salt tasty? Does it taste like salt? Is a Christian doing what is normative for the Christian? If a Christian is not regularly in the in the Bible, not regularly in prayer, not regularly in fellowship with fellow believers, one would have to stop and ask, is this person really even a Christian? What has made them just the normal expectation for what a Christian is? And so that would be test number one. Is a Christian being salt in that capacity? Just normal, what you'd expect, run-of-the-mill, average salt. But now we get into a little bit more the deeper meaning of salt. Again, this preservation or this preserving component of what salt does. And so, secondly, the Christian has to ask, am I preserving the world? Now, just time out for 1 second, because obviously any Christian who's, ready for the pun, worth his salt, would know that they can't stop the world from sin. I, as a Christian, can't make the world stop sinning, obviously. Even collectively, we as the church couldn't make the world stop sinning. Right? If every Christian was just 100% on fire, like that wouldn't stop the world from sinning. Sin would still happen. How do I know this? Because I know you, the Christian listening, and I know me, the Christian speaking, we still sin. So it's not a perfect concept with that. But what I mean is the Christian preserving? Is the Christian, again, living a life that draws attention to the truth and makes people pause? Or have we lost saltiness in the fact that we aren't willing to speak truth where people just can feel like they can do whatever? A classic example, in my years of ministry, I don't know how many times this happened to me. Actually, I think it even may still happen every now and again because I'm still in the Christian, my profession is still in the Christian world, so to speak. But, someone will be hanging out with them. They'll know that I either had served as a pastor or they know that I teach at a Christian school, wherever the case may be, right? They know I'm a Christian. And so they'll say some sort of expletive that's very common in the world, not common in the church, the F word or, fill in the blank, whatever your favorite curse word might be. Excuse me. And they'll go, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, my bad, or my mistake, or, oh, I'm so, just be very apologetic for cursing. Now, never once have I ever gotten upset or told somebody to not swear in front of me. Never once. Growing up not in a Christian home and growing up in the sporting world, I heard cursing more than I can recall. Just a part of the locker room talk, right, as they say. Very vulgar. So I'm super familiar with it. It doesn't really faze me. Yes, I don't swear. But again, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't, trip me up. I don't get mad about it. Unless someone's like, it's every other word, it's like really distracting. But I mean, that's more of just a talk better kind of a thing rather than, oh my gosh, I'm so offended. But my point in that, in telling that story, because again, so many times people would say something and apologize. I didn't ask you to do that. But what do they know? They know Christians don't like swearing. They've just sworn in front of a Christian, so they feel the need to apologize. Now, what's important to note that when it does happen, I go, hey, they'll apologize. Oh, hey, sorry, I did that. It's like, hey, it doesn't, it's okay. Like, I'm not mad about it. Like, and I don't get upset about it. But that's never, again, led me to a point where I've ever gone, oh, well, you can go ahead and do it. I don't care. Like, I don't tell them it's okay. I don't ever endorse it. I don't say, hey, oh, yeah, sure, man, go ahead. Like, whatever. It's like, hey, I'm not appalled. I don't judge you for it. But at the same time, I don't endorse it. And so I make that distinction because that's a form of what I'm talking about with this preservation stuff. That if we are going to be salt, we ought to be preserving and not allowing for sinful behavior to go on around us. There's quite a bit to be said about what that really looks like, and how we should carry ourselves when we consider this notion of preservation. And so I do think we have a moral obligation to also be actively seeking out the corruption and, quote unquote, applying salt to it in a hopes to preserve it. I've talked about a lot of controversial things in my episodes, I suppose. So, pick any one of them, right? Right? Like, just jump right for the jugular with controversial issues. Abortion. I've spoken out against it. I've written a couple articles about it on my blog site because I want to speak the truth of what that is. It's murder, in case you didn't know. And I want to speak the truth of that. So I have a moral obligation to speak truthfully about it in an attempt to preserve the corruption. Right? Talked LGBTQ, how, again, people are called to repentance for that. Again, same notion. We as a church can't go, it's not really that big of a deal. It's just a moral issue, whatever. It's whatever you think. No. We can't walk that wishy-washy line. We have to make stances and stand up for what is true and what is good and what is righteous. And so, again, we can see that, and it's important because what is the warning? You are the salt of the earth. You are this. Be salt. Preserve. Taste like salt. Look like salt. How shall it its saltiness be restored? It can't. It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled upon, under people's feet. So basically, what this gets to is, if you've gotten to the point where you're like, whatever, if you live your life however you want, you do you, kind of a mentality as a Christian, you don't stand up for the truth, you're not speaking into the corruption around you, you're not standing up for God's standard, for God's morality, for the truth of God, you've lost your saltiness, and it doesn't deserve, you basically are worthless as salt, because you're not serving your purpose. Now, I know that sounds harsh, but again, think about what that does. If you claim to be a Christian and you're unwilling to stand up for the truth, unwilling to draw that line, someone comes along, someone says, hey, I'm thinking this or I'm thinking that, I don't need really, Jesus, I'm a good person. And you go, yeah, you live your life, you live your truth. You've just condemned them to hell because you were unwilling to stand up and speak the truth. It shows that you're more interested in either keeping peace with them or some sort of other fear that's allowed to take over, instead of you to speak up the truth and to be salt. So we need to be salt. Okay, so moving right along to the next part, verse 14, it says, "You are the light of the world." Again, this is the case. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Duh. Obviously, in our day and age, with all the technological advancement, with electricity and all these things, you can see a city from miles away because of how bright they are. Or if you've ever seen those satellite images from space shooting down onto, you know, America, whatever, and you can see where all the major civilization spots are because they're these bright illuminated areas, and then, you know, eventually find a wilderness spot and it's dark, and then, you know, this whole map is, you know, they're cool pictures. I love them. But very clear to see that. And so this is that notion. Okay, so keep going in verse 15. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to the whole house. Now again, we typically aren't lighting a lantern, and, you know, having to set it up in our homes because, again, electricity, all that. But how many lights are underneath your table? Probably none, unless you got some weird aesthetic where it like shoots the neon light or whatever. Like, I bet there's somebody who has that, but maybe probably none of my listeners. I don't know. Maybe you do, and if you do, whatever. But again, you don't have it for the purpose of, you know, lighting up your room. That's going to be a good overhead light, like the one. Well, you guys can't see it because my camera's not pointing at it, but I got one right there because it's filling up the room. You put it up in the ceiling. You put it up high so it can illuminate the room. Now, again, this is basic stuff. We know this promise, but it needs to be said because now we're going to take this as a metaphor and go, how then are you a light to the community around you? Do you light a lamp and cover it so that it's worthless? Or do you light a lamp so it can be seen? Because this is what he continues on to say in verse 16. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So do you see what it's saying? It's understanding that light is like good works. You show your good works not so that you get praise, but that people will praise God because of it. Anyways, so are we taking our works and putting them on display for the world to see? Again, not for our own glory, but so that they will know Christ. Or do we hide what we do and keep it secret? Now, again, if you keep reading this sermon, continue on in the following passages, the following chapters, there will be times where Jesus will call out the hypocrite, right? And he'll say, see, this guy preaches on the street or prays on the street to get attention. You need to pray alone. Or this person will give so that people will see them making their offering to God. And so there is a cautionary tale to go along with it. So I would highly recommend, if you've never read through the whole Sermon on the Mount, please do. And also, like I've said this before, I'll probably do a whole episode on it at some point, but don't ever trust just me. I told you that I've been reading from Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. Go look it up yourself. Then once you've looked it up and you've read it, and then you've read through the whole Sermon on the Mount, and you have some context to work with, then go pick up some commentaries, spend some time in prayer about it, and go, is Rob crazy, or is he on to something? And then once you've done some study on that, then if you want to argue with me or shoot me, hey, I really appreciate what you said there. Fine, great, go ahead. But again, please don't just take me at my word. I'm just a man. You don't. But some of you might not even know who I am personally, and those of you who do know who I am, again, you know that I'm not perfect because you know me personally. Anyways, back on topic. So there is a cautionary point of that. Like that's what I was saying about the hypocrite. Don't be doing it for your own self-glorification, your own attention, your own reward, but you do it so that you can point people back to Christ. Case in point. Why am I doing this? Am I recording this audio or video for those of you who watch on YouTube? Am I doing this so that I can become super wealthy and become some popular YouTube sensation? No. I think my videos are probably too long for that. I'm also relatively unknown. I can't say I'm completely unknown. I have, I think, 5 subscribers on YouTube, so, better watch out. Maybe. I don't even know if it's that many. And probably one of them is my wife, maybe. So I don't know. Yeah? And she doesn't even know. I don't even know if my own wife follows me. So that's how unknown I am. But anyways, my point with that is, no, I'm not trying to make this some thing. I know that there are guys who have done things like this, it has taken off, and they have actually gotten, monetization from YouTube or monthly donors because somebody's really people are supporting them. I get that. I don't have a problem with that, but that's not my goal. My goal is to put out thoughtful things so that the Christian has some encouragement and some correction if this is a correctionary kind of a study for that, because my heart is that we as the church grow and the people of God are equipped for the good works that are before them. And so that's why we do this. And so I can use that as an example that's the motivation, that's the heart behind this. I'm putting this out, I'm putting a light out so that it can hopefully reach other people either with the gospel or with biblical truth to challenge and help them in their quest to know Christ. And so what are we doing? How are you a light at your workplace, at your school, at the grocery store, wherever you may be, that people will see what you're doing and go, what is he about? Why is he about this Jesus? And what does that mean for me? So, okay. Salt of the earth, light of the world. We do this all to the glory of God. Now gut check time. Because I know there are plenty of times where either a missed opportunity or just a blatant run away from an opportunity or something to that effect, where just scared, concerned, prideful, whatever the case may be, where I don't really get into preaching the truth or being salt or being light. I know I've not measured up. And so I will say that not as a like, oh, poor guy making a video or a podcast, oh, shame on him. I say that because I'm assuming that you probably too have not necessarily been the most consistent with that. And so I want to challenge both of us, myself and you, the listener, to find someone in your church, a friend, someone you trust, who you can look at this passage with and say, you know what? I haven't always been salt. I haven't always been light. We help keep me accountable. Pray together about it. Talk together about it. And then check in. Have you been salt? Have you been light? Now, in my day-to-day, I won't lie. It's pretty easy. I teach at a Christian school. It's really easy for me to talk about Jesus in my Bible and history classes that I teach because that's my job, my literal job. But I definitely know that sometimes I'm at the park. There's other parents around while our kids are playing. I could bring up an awkward conversation about Jesus and go, hey, what do you think? I know that, I might be with friends or family who don't know Jesus and I didn't necessarily bring it up. Maybe I have in the past, but it's been a few months, haven't checked in. So I get it. Like we dropped the ball on those things. And so it's really easy for us to remember that and go, oh yeah, I need to do better. But I don't think if we don't really check in with one another about it, how are we going to check that? So maybe your spouse would be a good person to check in with that. Maybe, again, a good friend at the church who you trust help you with that. Your pastor, I don't know. There's a myriad of ways there. And so I would strongly encourage all of us to take some time to reflect on that and go, okay, God, how can I be salt? How can I be light in my context, in my sphere of influence? Because we all can be. And it's what we're called to do. Because again, what does this end here? That they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. How cool is it when we've ever been on this side of the story where we have been a light, we have been salt to someone or a few people or whatever, and someone out of that goes, hey, I finally see it. Finally see that I need a Savior and Jesus is Him and He can redeem me and free me from sin. Praise God. Like, how cool is it when we finally see that or we hear a story like that? Because at the end of the day, the things that give me the most joy are the things when I see someone praising God. And so I hope that that is what we want to be about as Christians. So I think this is a really practical Theology Happens kind of a podcast, because here I am going, here's what the text says, now let's do something about it, because again, like the passage that inspired the name, we have, James 1, we have to be not just hearers but doers of the word. So here's our opportunity to actually go and be salt and be light, because as I believe it was Stephen the Levite famously said on one of his albums, salt is not heard, but it's tasted, so experienced in the way someone lives, and light is not heard, but rather it's seen. So again, how is it being on display? So let's go out there, let's preach the gospel, let's preach truth to preserve the corruption. Excuse me, not to preserve the corruption, but to preserve the world, to rid the world of corruption. So we stand up for what is true, what is good, what is noble. Philippians 4:8. And then let us put our lights out so that people can see the truth and glorify God for the goodness that He's done in us. So thank you for tuning in to Theology Happens. And if you want more, you can always find us on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you search Theology Happens, you should find me and the social media accounts. Also Gab as well. Not as active there because I often forget about it. It's the newer one to me, so apologies to Gab, but I do like your platform. Anyways, so if you want to stay in touch there, or if you want to go old school, I do actually have a email address as well, and you can email me at theologyhappens@gmail.com if you ever have any questions or want to engage in some dialogue. So, again, thank you, and bless we salt and light, and God bless.